I used to look like a 15 or 16-year-old then, like even though I was not. Like I'm people when they would see me in the Microsoft corridors or buildings, they would think I'm somebody's daughter or sibling that came into the building. And suddenly one day when they see me in a meeting, they're like, "Oh my gosh, do you work here?"
Hey friends, this is Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer.
On this episode, I get to talk to Uma Subramanian, founder and CEO of Limitless Leaders. Limitless Leaders offers personalized coaching programs to individuals willing to overcome their career plateau.
If you enjoy Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer, don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on the new episodes. And you can pick up podcast merch at perrytiu.com/shop. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Ruined by a Software Engineer. I'm your host Perry, and today with me is Uma Subramanian, founder and CEO of the Limitless Leaders. Uma, how are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much, Perry. It's an honor to be here.
I think honor, you're overselling it a little bit, but no, honestly, I can say likewise in terms of like having guests on this show that has so many different perspective in tech. You spend decades, if not, at big tech. But really, like before I jump into everything that you can talk about, who is Uma and what is the Limitless Leaders?
So I'm working as a leadership coach. I founded Limitless Leaders. We help tech professionals become sought after leaders. And before that, I've spent, as you said, 2 decades at Microsoft and almost a year at a tech startup. And, I came from New Delhi, India in 2001 to Seattle to work at Microsoft and had a blast working there. We'll probably talk about some of my journey, but really excited. We are actually helping people thrive in leadership roles. We are seeing changes, we are seeing results, and it's really exciting. And
No, I could even just feel it because I think the way you were talking about, like, of course, there's some of the keywords I said, like sought after leaders, right? Like there are people who don't know that they are sought after leaders. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this
yeah.
uncovering is like this discovery journey. So we're gonna jump into that in just a second. Even just you were saying, like in terms of like results, right? Like some people do. I mean, like if you want to be very objective and superficial, be like you could live for the results. But some people obviously like they don't perceive it that way, right? They could have major impact to everything around them, but like if they don't get told what the results are, they'll never find out that, hey, how great they are at the end of the day. So I think like even you just leading into a lot of that, of maybe your experience of like seeing all that yourself, I think that's going to be a fun part of the journey. But even one thing that you mentioned even earlier, when you say where you're from, where you grew up, basically in New Delhi, I've been very fortunate. I've passed by there recently. It was the first time in my life where I actually like had a connection in New Delhi, and it was just quite a great experience. But I think what I'm always interested in is I think about like the influences of people like growing up, for example, right? Some people grow up, some people are like the biggest tech nerds nowadays, and they only talk about tech. But then you think about it, like they grew up in an environment that had like zero tech, for example, and that makes a great like perspective contrast in terms of who they are. So my question probably to you is that, what was it like growing up in New Delhi, I guess? Like, was it already very techy? Did you have a lot of like relatives doing in tech, or like what did that, I guess, landscape look like?
so we're talking about like, late 1990s, in 2001, I came to Microsoft. So at that time, honestly, like when I did chemistry honors. So for my, college, like after doing my 12th grade, I actually just because I scored the highest in my school in chemistry, I ended up choosing chemistry honors, and I did bachelor's in chemistry. Had no inclination to do anything really with chemistry. So I knew when I signed up for bachelor's in science that I will also be doing computers. And so I signed up for in India, even I think it's there even right now, but there is a very popular program that you can do on the side with a full-time college degree. It's a school called NIIT. I ended up signing up there and signed up for a 3-year program. It was just obvious, like by that time, like when I got into college, like finished 12th grade, it was very obvious, like everyone, it was either engineering or medical. Like that's kind of what everyone was doing. So we were surrounded by that. And you had also asked about, what influenced you. So I kind of followed my sister, my eldest sister. She was my role model. I looked up to her. She had followed similar path. She did, bachelor's, and then on the side, she also did this 3-year, this computer programming and computer science type program on the side. So and she got into a job very quickly, and she was, doing really well, thriving, and I really looked up to her, and I still do. And so that was just a natural path for me. So I signed up for my bachelor's in science. It was a full-time program, and then in the evenings it'll be a 3-hour course that you go somewhere else and you do an in-person, computer science programming. And the way they teach you in that program is they kind of teach you from like every single programming language, every single like database, like your back end, front end, like everything. When you come out of that program in 3 years, you have a year of internship. The third year is internship where you actually go and work. It's called a graduate of NIT program. So you come out of it and you kind of know, C++, Java, and like pretty much like SQL, every single like concept that you need to know with it. So that's kind of what I learned. So I went through that program. I got out of like chemistry honors and the computer science, computer programming type of this diploma program on the side. And when I graduated from these, my sister was already at Microsoft in Seattle, and she was able to again help me out by forwarding my resume. And long story short, visa. I mean, obviously you have to wait for visa and all of that, but everything worked out. And in 2001, I was here at Microsoft working as a programmer writer. So the role that I got into is called programmer writer, which means you are 50% programming, you're 50% technical writer, but for writing for developer audience. So my role was actually to build code samples and write technical documentation for developer audience that's building applications on top of Microsoft platforms. So using Microsoft APIs and developer tools. And so that was what I came in to build. And I just loved it. I evolved my role as years went by, excelled every year, and just had a blast.
There's so many things great to call out. The least interesting thing is visa talk. I talk about visa talk all the time. I'm Canadian, and working in the States is visa talk. I'm Canadian. I worked in the UK, and it's always about visa talk at the end. That's the least sexy thing. We're not going to jump too much into the visa talk. But what we can jump into is even just at the beginning when you're saying like different. For me, how I see this is different region has like different, I guess, like influences. What I mean by that is that when I grew up in Montreal, Canada, the influence of going into what program in university, everybody was either going to the business, like business schools, very, very popular. People were going to that. Or people were going to psych, like psychiatry. That was the other one that's like very big. And then medical was the third one that like no matter who you knew at what school, whatever, somebody's going into business, psychiatry, or of course like medical school and all that kind of fun stuff. I mean, even when you're mentioning like the part of like, maybe the flavor of your surrounding was more like engineering centric and medical centric. Like those are good positive influence already from just like physically being there. Like it's hard to take for granted, but that's one thing that, when people are very proud of like the Bay Areas because everybody thinks that way, you kind of have a similar, environment.
Yes. And definitely I will also call out that there was no stigma of girls, doing engineering or getting into STEM. I mean, absolutely. Like I didn't grow up with that. So it was very normal and common for all genders to jump into these types of programs in whether it's engineering or computer science or the kind of the diploma program I did. We would see everyone. So yeah, I definitely didn't. Once only after I came here, I now see I have a daughter as well, and now I see definitely there is a stigma with women in STEM, but was definitely not something I experienced or felt in my early years back there.
Yeah, and that's such a great point to call out because I feel like nowadays, like, sure, we definitely put a lot of importance on that today, and deservedly so. It was just so interesting that, like, when we talk about, the next second person to you is all like, whether it's women in STEM or just STEM in general, has always been, it's like decades, like, we're just, some other parts of the world are just chasing that today, which is always just like a person. I'm not saying that people are behind. I'm just saying that, like, there's
It's
a lot of
different.
stuff. Exactly. And that's why I was just saying that, like, even the first thing you mentioned that is always quite fun. And of course, like, going through this, like, chem journey and then getting into more like the I guess, like, computer science-y bits of it, of doing that at the same time. Not only is that incredibly impressive, don't get me wrong, that's insanely a lot of work that you put in, which is something that I keep on saying that hard work is always a fun part about all this. I kind of did something similar. Well, I mean, like, not the hard work part. I lived through my university. What I did similar was that I did, health sciences on my first semester. So when you talk about, like, biochem and, like, just biology and all that kind of stuff, oh my God, I hated those. I hated biochem so much with, like, Oh, and of course, you got to give a shout out to relatives. Like, I'm keep on saying that a lot of people have really great relatives that do great stuff. And sometimes your other siblings will just ignore that. Sometimes your sibling will just not follow any of that path. And then it'll just be like, whatever. But then, like, as we were saying, like, you were able to recognize good influence and be able to take that with you in terms of, oh, yeah, that's a good guiding light. That's something that, like, it's not impossible to achieve something that makes sense at the end of the day. And then, of course, that's what guided you into, hey, let's talk about a bit more of the techie stuff, because, of course, it's a tech podcast at the end of the day. Maybe even before I jump too much into that section, that how it led you from, like, studying tech and all that kind of stuff, do you remember what was the first computer you had? Just because I keep on saying that everybody gets one at different age, at different time, whatever that beast was back then. Do you remember what was yours?
So definitely Windows. I remember DOS. Like I don't know if you know DOS, but starting with DOS, I mean that's what I remember. But I don't remember like anything beyond that. Like I remember, even when my journey with computers started when, of course, my first year of college when I joined that 3-year GNIIT program, and that's where I was exposed to computers. And I think maybe at school too. Even in my high school, like we had one, a small computer lab, and we would use it. I think I probably used it there. I definitely didn't have one at home at that point. But when I started with this 3-year program in my college, I'm positive that I had a computer at home, but I just cannot remember anything beyond that. It definitely was Windows, kind of a DOS type of machine, something like that. Yeah, nothing else jumps out.
Yeah, and I keep saying every time I think about this question, because I do ask this question in Lies Not Like, I think it's always been a visual thing, right? I know it's an audio podcast, but I feel like for all of us, whenever we think about our first machine, there's always an image that shows up. Whether the keyboard was attached to the actual like computer or not, that's always a fun question. But then like maybe, okay, this is a really dumb question, because of course we're going to jump to another topic on that. But like, was there a lot of like, just because you were saying when you talk about public computers, there's always like guardrails? I feel like there's always something that like, oh, you're not allowed to go into this folder, not allowed to go into that folder. Because of course, like I grew up in an environment where we had personal, my dad was a techie person. He would bring a lot of different pieces and build like a really Frankenstein like PC at home. And I remember like our first Windows, like Windows 95 or something. I physically remember
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely Windows 95. I remember too. Yeah. Started with Windows 95. Yes.
It's beautiful. Everything like, so basically what I was trying to say was that if you put that context into a public setting, whether it's a school lab or whether it's like in a classroom, do you remember anything any special about that kind of like setup in terms of they intentionally locked a folder or you needed a password to log in? Was there anything crazy fun like that?
Oh, I'm sure I had like password issues. It still happens to me all the time. We used to also transmit like funny messages between the consoles in the classroom. Like I remember those types of things. Yeah. Well, I haven't gone back to those days in a long time. So thank you for this conversation. It's bringing back a lot of memories.
No, trust me, we still send really funny messages till today. It's not something that we've forgotten over the years. Like it's, you go to any website right now, just open it, you'll definitely see some fun stuff in there. So I'm glad that was mentioned for sure. But then obviously that eventually, when we talk about coding, everybody does, I guess, like the first for loop. I remember my first for loop. Weirdly, it was Java. It wasn't even C. It wasn't even C++. We did have C and C++ because I did comp sci at the end of the day at McGill University. But my first for loop was in Java. Do you remember what was the first like exposure in that case of like, oh wow, you could write stuff like this?
Yes, yeah. And again, I remember that program, they taught us C, C++, Java, everything. So, we kind of started with object-oriented programming. I probably think it was C++ first. Yeah, cannot remember the exact order in which we learned. But so that program is very different from getting an engineering degree, where there is a lot of, our computer science degree. This one is more practical and hands-on, and they teach you what will, help you like actually get a job and, build something. So it was hands-on. So I learned to program in several different languages. Definitely the Fibonacci series and finding like all the writing those for loops and all that definitely was the fun part. I remember those. You cannot forget those times for sure.
I love this part where the craziest thing I remember this very, very clearly is that if you try to do like factorial in like Java or something and you do like what's the factorial of like 4 million, like your computer just explodes and break or whatever. Like it's obviously it's an extremely huge number and it doesn't compute it. The one language that this professor, shout out to Prakash, he shows us what is it, Scheme, I think. It's one of those like very researchy language. Don't get me wrong, like a lot of people still do it. You could do like factorial of like 5 million and it'll give you a number. I remember it was something insane. And like, to be fair, I don't know how you could check if it's correct or not. Maybe it was just like complete like gibberish, but there were just some of these languages like Scheme and like OCaml and all these like very like functional programming languages that are just surprising. Anyways, that's like us talking about nerdy stuff in school. That's always been part of that conversation, especially for a podcast like this. I think like the other fun part that I came out saying that like I definitely was gonna ask you like what is a programmer writer. The moment you said that, I've always been like, is it? But then like you already described a little bit. So a couple minutes ago, you were already describing like it was programming, but also being able to like communicate how you could use this code to build stuff. And like the more you mention about that, modern DevRel is probably like developer relationship managers mostly. Like, it just screams to me that it's the same thing. Like, the precursor to modern DevRel is what you were just describing.
This is part of DevRel. Yeah, I mean, what I did kind of comes under the developer relations umbrella. Like, that's where I've spent my 2 decades.
Yeah, this preemptive thing. So basically, we went from like you grew up in an environment, obviously with very, very good influence and like with opportunistic education, which is something that a lot of people sought after. And then you got this opportunity at Microsoft, as you're saying. So that was was it the first time you been to America at that point, or have you been?
Oh yes, no. I mean, I came. So they flew me in for an interview, which was awesome. So I came first just for an interview trip, and 3 teams interviewed me. 2 teams from Visual Studio and 1 from Microsoft Office. And I think interestingly, what happened in the interview was I think I did really well, but I also the hiring managers, the hiring teams got a little bit of doubt that maybe Uma is really interested in programming and not so much writing. And so there was a little bit of hesitation. And so I went back in a couple of weeks after the interview, and then we didn't get a quick response. And we were like, what's happening here? And then my sister was able to, because she was already at Microsoft, one of the hiring managers actually reached out to her and just, checked in with her saying, hey, do you think Uma does she understand the role? Is she really interested in programming writing, or is it just, she's interested only in programming because the role is going to require her to write as well? And my sister was able to clarify that, I think she really understands this. And yes, she's interested in both. And so then that team was able to offer me a position. And then I had to wait for visa and ended up coming in 2001.
I mean, like, yeah, that clarification itself is so helpful because the thing is, like, a lot of these, like, behind the scenes stuff, not many people get to visualize it. Even today, like, for people who are talking about any roles, how are decisions made behind the scene and everything. A lot of times, okay, it also happens where, like, you interview for a role and by the time you start, it's a completely different role. At least on your end, like, as we're saying, because this is just the beginning of the journey, because we're going to get to the point where how all that, like, you didn't come out straight out gate with all these, like, qualities of understanding your role 100%, being able to express it to other people, being able to lead other people into following this path of sharing knowledge and you also, good practices more than anything. So I think what was the hardest part between that, in the sense of like one of them is fairly like technical in the sense of understanding like how to write the code, but the other one is that like I know great programmers who just can't explain anything.
Right. Yeah. So I think, and that's the thing, right? So when I came here also, I think one of the things to understand is this was 2001, like, very early on. And there were lot of diversity in like software engineering and program management and all that at Microsoft. And I was always in the engineering teams, like the product teams throughout my career in the Microsoft Office 365 organization, my entire 20 years. And so I was surrounded by, all kinds of like diverse individuals in program management, and software engineering and other disciplines. But in the role that I was in, there was not a lot of diversity like compared to other roles, just because of the nature of work, right? It also requires you have you're able to write and communicate effectively. So there was not a lot of diversity. So I think for me, when I came in, I kind of knew that if I'm going to, succeed in this role, really need to get good at writing and being able to communicate to a technical like developer audience. The technical strength, like my ability to code and program and think like an programmer, really helped because I came in with basic. I mean, I would even say maybe I was overqualified in that space for the role that I was in terms of my ability to program and code and build samples. So that I made that intentional decision that I'm going to really invest in building my ability to write, and that really helped me. So I just invested in different things very early on, different courses, like whatever was available. It was not like there was a lot available, to be honest, to in terms of technical writing, but whatever resources was available, I used those, and also used the resources within Microsoft that was available to ramp up, and kind of very quickly, very early on, establish myself that I can write really well. And so, yeah, once I was able to do that, then it was the role itself was always very easy for me, honestly, to say that. So it was, and because of which I was able to always take side projects, drive cross group initiatives. And that's very, like, even in the first couple of months, like within the first 2 months, I actually, in addition to writing my very first article, like MSDN article, and publishing that, which was about integrating Excel with BizTalk server. I don't know if people even know BizTalk server, but that was my very first technical article. Once I was working on that, and I published that within the first couple of months or first few weeks. And then we saw a need in the organization that there was a tool, my skip level manager at that time had this idea for a tool that we could all use in the organization that our engineering organization did not have the bandwidth to build. And so I took that idea and pulled in two other folks from the organization, and we actually built a real, like, full-fledged engineering tool that would help the entire organization for maybe 3 or 4 years. And so those are the kinds of things that allowed me to do, like my ability to code, my ability to do these types of things really helped me. Like, it put me on the track, like right from the beginning. Within 2 months, I was able to show that, hey, I can write and do this, do my basic job that I was hired to do, but also always be able to, think big and come up with tool ideas. Or then we also got into community. Like, I was also one of the people that really focused on customer connections. So I started a virtual team within our organization for connecting with customers and understanding their needs. There was many times a lot of complaints about documentation and samples and all that. So we created a V team to go listen in forums and engage in forums and all that. So that was, again, one initiative very early on I was able to lead. And so those types of things really set me, up for success in my role. And then it just took off from there.
No, I think those are the stuff where it's like, it's not a temporary learning skill, I guess. It's stuff that, like, you could apply to your current project, and your project could last you, a year, 2 years, or whatever. But then, like, after that project, it's still with you. Knowing how to talk to so many different stakeholders and so many different parties, like talking to customers, even that itself is already like a thing that you'll remember for the rest of your life, if anything. So I feel like the way I was kind of describing how you were kind of like, you had so many different, I guess, like, projects left and right flying around, but I wouldn't call that like chaos at all, because it seemed very focused regardless of like what project it was. So I think like that was one of the interesting part, where it's like not everybody gets the opportunity to have all these problems, but then once you figure out your rhythm, and even if you put the extra work to be better at it, because one of the questions I did have for myself when you were talking about all that was basically like, I know this is not like supposed to be a literature course or anything. What was the writing style you kind of like embrace when you were trying to like write articles? Was there like a tone where it's like very direct, where it's like step by step, 1, 2, 3 doing that? Or was it more like, oh, let me handhold you a little bit and like give you a bit of like colorful, I don't know, like Dan Brown does this, where he just describes like a wall way too long, for example. Like he spends like 3 pages on like what a wall looks like. I don't know where you fit in this like range of like writing style.
And I think, to be honest, like initially when I started, I just kind of mirrored what everyone else was doing, and built it from there. But definitely mine was more, really putting myself in developer shoes. I don't write anything unless I build it first. Like I myself build an application or whatever it is that I'm expecting the developer to walk through the documentation and build. So that's really how I think and work. So that was the first thing. So if I'm teaching you how to build an application on Excel, for example, I would build a sample first. I would build it, understand how it works, and then I would guide you step by step. And then I also like to have the little bit of the background information that's needed, the technical architecture, things like that. So I think, yeah, I was definitely one of the writers, in my organization that was very comprehensive, very developer oriented, in that, and those types of things helped as well. But I would say that was my style. But in terms of like being very conversational or anything like that, I don't think that was the style of MSDN at that time when we started. So definitely I would say it was more just to the point, hey, this is how you do it, and this is, I'll walk you through this kind of a style, not so much, using a conversational tone like a blog or whatever. I mean, that was not the style initially, although we later on got into blogs. I actually published, in my team, we published a blog. It was all just pictures. It was SharePoint in pictures. It was called SharePoint in Pictures. And it was just all about like how to, or a SharePoint developer facing blog that would explain SharePoint development in pictures. So we did some creative stuff like that later on, but I think definitely, if I look back, most of the actual technical documentation that I created was more direct and to the point.
And of course, it evolved. We were talking about like many, many, many years of
Exactly.
like writing
Yes.
styles over here. So I'm sure it evolves over a thing. And like
Yes.
some of the key highlights that you definitely mentioned is like the moment you said putting yourself in like the developer's shoes or the reader's shoes. It's something that you apply till today. You apply this, I apply this, that whoever you talk to, it makes the conversation a lot easier. If you're talking to a product, think like a product. If you're talking to a business stakeholder, think like a business stakeholder. It makes your life so much easier. It's not obvious. That's the one thing, is that like we're seeing it now. And the thing is, like, I'm so glad you brought it up, because like if it's not obvious, is think about who you're talking to, and it'll make your life a lot easier. This is the last tangent before we jump into the meat of like how it brings us today and all the limitless leaders like features that we have. Did you have access to the source code of Excel or any of the applications that you were using with while writing all that? I'm assuming
Oh, yes.
yes, but
yes.
like
100%. Yes.
it wasn't obvious to me, but I mean, like, I think I did speak to another guest who did work on like a different part of like Microsoft at that time. And it's like, oh yeah, like definitely you could just like navigate the whole code base. And it's like, they're also saying that like the releases were probably just once a year, so it's not like a CI/CD thing. So you really have to like get on the right schedule, and you cannot miss the schedule. I remember this like very clearly. You could not miss a release schedule. It was quite interesting. I'm sure it was similar when.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, maybe this is the last point before we jump into Limitless Leader. Is basically when we talk about going from, I guess, like, you were basically in the midst of like programming and writing, but then like eventually like there's maybe less and less programming and more like dev reling and more that space of like writing and everything. I guess like maybe from your perspective of spending of course like over 20 years at Microsoft doing this and seeing it from the inside out and also from the outside in, is what is developer relationship? Like I know we've spoken about so many topics that touches it, but maybe from your perspective in terms of helping the next generation, quotation mark, understanding like, oh yeah, the predecessor of that was everything that we described. Maybe today, what would you consider or what would you describe developer relations as?
It's empowering developers to succeed in what they want to do with the products, APIs, tools that you're building. I think that's what it is. And for me, like, my role slowly evolved into more and more of developer community. So I started with programming, writing, and then, as I said, I became a manager. I managed the SharePoint developer programmer writing team for many years, and then after that, I actually took on a role for a couple of years, full-time coding and building showcase applications for Microsoft 365. And so that was all about building showcase applications. So these applications can be demoed at big conferences, by executives. Like that was kind of that team. So I was there for a couple of years. So that was full-time coding. It was super fun. We did. That was also the time that I also had to move from traditional like C sharp and Windows type of programming to Angular and Web 2.0 and also mobile development. Like I've also built a mobile app in Swift and Objective C. Actually, one of them ended up getting me a patent, which is I'm also like super excited about. So yeah, it's just a lot of like interesting stuff happened along the way, and then finally I ended up in a role where it was an internal facing role for the first time. And this was about evangelizing our AI platform that we wanted every Microsoft, developer, engineer, product team to build on. And so that was an internal developer relations, developer evangelism type of role that I got myself into, and I was responsible for launching a developer portal that will help these developers successfully build on the AI platform, as well as building a community and really evangelizing and getting, creating awareness across the company. So that was, I think my whole journey like that evolved from just traditional like content to community and those types of roles. And really that's really what I see as developer relations as well. There's a huge developer relations organization for with Visual Studio and the productivity tools in the organization, and I don't know what those names are now because they keep changing. But really the idea is if you want developers to build on your platform, you have to create fans. I think that's really how I would think of what the group does. And you offer value, you help them succeed, you go really activate the developer community and build relationships, and then get them to build on your platform. I mean, that's really what the goal of developer relations is. And I've seen that play out. We've done that as well. Like we would go to conference, like in my role as a programmer writer, like every year I would go to, or there was a couple of like tech, I think it was called TechEd, and then there was a developer specific conference, which I think Microsoft Developer Conference, I think that was what it was called at that time. So I used to go to these conferences every year and talk to developers, do demos or help them with hands-on labs, things like that, maybe do a demo. So all those kinds of things. I was always, involved in that. My teams were involved in that. But I also see that, definitely evolving, and there's just so much now that's developers can do with Microsoft platforms. So there is a lot going on for sure.
That's what developer relations is at the end of the day. Is that like you're building stuff for the developers, mostly for the developers, for some products. And of course, like being able to create this relation is so hard. It's so hard to be able to have user understand how it's built, why you're using it, how you can make it better, and all that kind of stuff. So I like how you summarize really what your experience of working in that, I guess, like pillar, that domain kind of looked like. At the beginning of the episode, I was like, there's so many perspectives that you got to see, right? You got to see from the perspective of somebody building it, you got to see from the person of using it. You also got to see a person of technically, in quotation marks, selling it, whether it actually costed something or zero. It's really selling that product at the end. And I obviously love the part where you're saying like the AI stuff of sharing that. I don't know if that was like Cortana related or not. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But even the internal part, you were saying that like it's more like an internal facing role, but as far as I know, that's still like tens and tens and tens of thousands of people looking into all that. So
Yes.
I know a lot of public projects, open source projects, that have way less eyeballs on it than what you were doing. So it was just really fun to hear.
Yeah, this AI platform is huge, like beyond like what we would think of, like one platform. It's huge. Several thousand engineers all over the world building the platform, and this is what actually Cortana, Windows, Office, and like any Microsoft product that uses some kind of AI feature, which now everything is using AI. So all of those features are built on this platform. So it's kind of the backbone of many of the products and features you interact with.
It brings us to today where you're very proud, very extremely proud of Limitless Leaders, which is something that, like, of course, I got the chance to see a little bit and I absolutely love hearing about it. But maybe just as a very high level cover to be like, what is Limitless Leaders? And of course, we're going to talk about like maybe the name and how we got there, but even just in general for anybody listening, I guess, what is Limitless Leaders?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take an example and say what happens. So let's say a product manager or a technical program manager, a software engineering manager, doesn't matter. You want to either get to your next senior role, or you want to, you just got into, let's say, a new management role, or you just got into some cross-functional strategic initiative and you're working with a lot of stakeholders and you just got into something new where you feel like, hey, now I need a little bit of help, a guide to help me with that. So some of these situations kind of spur that in my clients, and then they'll come and find me, and then we start working together. And what happens in the in that journey is they get to elevate on four levels. One is their strategic impact. So how can they add more value, how can they create more value within their organization, or even like maybe outside as well. And so that's one aspect. And we there's work that goes on there too. And my clients usually have the ideas, they have the ideas. It's just that when we work together, we focus on that and we make sure that they're actually elevating their impact. So that is the first pillar. The second pillar is um, helping them communicate with clarity and impact. So working on storytelling skills, high impact meetings. How do you kick off a meeting and within 90 seconds you are already setting the stage that you're a leader, that you can you're decisive, you make the goal of the meeting, the purpose of the meeting really clear, and you bring people on board, you build trust. So kind of those types of things. So again, the second framework, the second pillar is all about communication. So we make sure, and also helping them communicate their value and impact more clearly. Many of my clients struggle with that a little bit. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable sharing their value, right? Communicating the value. They feel like, oh, it's bragging, or it sounds like self-promotion. I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable, or I'm an introvert. So there's, sometimes those types of things goes on as well. So we make sure that they are, one, upgrading their mindset towards communicating, as well as they are learning strategies and frameworks. So when they show up, they're showing up powerfully, communicating the impact clearly, and creating and positioning themselves well for wherever they need to go. So that's kind of the second pillar. And then the third pillar is building their personal brand, a very unique leadership brand with a niche for themselves. So they are known uniquely for who they are and what value they bring. So a lot of work goes on there as well. And we work on the leadership brand to the point that others are able to articulate their brand, not just you communicate your brand, but then you also make sure that others are articulating it well, and then so that you're perceived in the way that you want to be perceived. That's one of the things we really focus on. And then the fourth pillar is making sure that you have a trusted circle of people and network, that whether it's sponsors, mentors, coaches, whoever, supporters, backers, so that you're continuously learning and growing. You have people opening doors for you, and you can lean on people in when in times of need. So that's kind of what I help with. And what happens is, as we work on these things, something changes. Typically, some of my clients, when they come to me, they will tell me, hey, I'm not seen, or I'm like, I'm like doing all these things and doing amazing work. I get some recognition, I get some results, but somehow I'm not able to unlock that higher level, or somehow I'm, somebody else is getting that, or those types of things happen sometimes with my clients. And the moment we start doing this work on these four pillars, and they are elevating their impact, they are communicating that, and they're building their brand and articulating it clearly, and also building relationships very quickly, like within a few weeks, things just suddenly start to change. And I have several stories of, then, people getting invited into different opportunities. What starts happening is then these people, or my clients, don't need to then chase after opportunities or wait for recognition or whatever. Just those things just start coming, and and yeah, without having to apply for things, you're getting, invited. An opportunity comes in, they're saying, oh, this person would be the best bet, and you're just pulled into it rather than having to go chase after things. So that's kind of what I'm seeing and what I help with, and it seems to work. And we are um, it's pretty exciting, and we're growing.
Everything that you mentioned, there's parts of it like, oh, I totally relate to this part, and there's totally this part that I want more and everything. The way that you captured all of it and put that into this framework of being a limitless leader, that's really the framework of why this all came together. And like, even before I jump into all of that, like, was that actually why it's called Limitless Leaders, or was there another story of like how the name came together?
Yes, that's another story, but it is, to me, this framework definitely fits that limitless leadership kind of mindset for sure, 100%.
I think one thing that is actually really fun is that like we got this opportunity to hear you break down all of these, because like there's a difference between learning guitar on your own versus learning guitar with somebody pointing out which direction you should go into, what you should improve.
Yeah.
So like if we have these like quick fire like questions, they might not be quick fire, but like related to these I guess like different pillars that we're talking about, like the strategic impact, which is one of them. The other one I'll be able to communicate with high purpose or like focus goals, that's another way. And then we're talking about like building a brand, and also like when we talk about being, having a trusting circle around you and everything. Maybe the quick fire questions when we talk about strategic impact real quickly is basically, what does that even mean? I mean, like obviously Perry has a definition. It sounds like a stupid question and everything, but like I know, at least on my plate, when we talk about strategic impacts, that like in a day I obviously have like maybe 10 or 15 or 20 things to do. And the thing is, like, they don't have the same impact. I could spend, honestly, so much time on the first 5 items, but those are just so not impactful.
Right.
That you could have spent half the time on maybe, like, some 2 other points. So maybe from your perspective of, like, when you work with different people, and I like how you called it, like, kind of mid-level people that are aware where they are. They're present in their role, and they know what's happening. What is your take on, like, strategic, or, like, how to make strategic decisions, maybe? That's probably the question I'm asking.
So again, it starts with organizational awareness, right? You need to know what the organizational needs, what the customer needs are. So really understanding that first, I mean, that's the first thing. So you need to listen, you need to go soak up, everything that you can about what's keeping the senior leaders up at night. What, where does our company need to go, or organization or team needs to go? And really having that is kind of the first thing I would say to be able to elevate your impact. Once you understand that, then you're just open to opportunities, right? You're just open to ideas, open to opportunities when things come up. You're not like, one thing that really helped for me, Perry, in my career is I never boxed myself into my role. So I never thought, okay, I am this, Excel programmer writer or SharePoint, manager, like, developer content team manager. So this is what I can do. Like, never that. Like, I did of course I knew that, okay, that was my primary responsibility. I have to do that. But I looked across and said, okay, my organization, like, what do we need? And that's how, within the first 2 months, when that opportunity came up to build this tool, I was very young, like new to the country. Everything was new. But within, 2 months or whatever, I was able to jump in and seize that opportunity, because I knew I figured out that, it was my skip level that came and, kind of pitched that idea. I jumped in and said, yes, I would, jump in and do that. There were so many senior people. One thing that is kind of funny, and I don't know if it's will resonate with the audience here, but I used to look like literally like a 15 or 16-year-old then, like, even though I was not, like, I'm very short, I'm 4'10" in height. And when I came in, I was very, like, also looked like literally a 15, 16. So people, when they would see me in the Microsoft like corridors or buildings, they would think I'm somebody's daughter or sibling that came into the building. And suddenly one day when they see me in a meeting, they're like, oh my gosh, do you work here? So that's really what would happen. So with that kind of, just 2 months into a new country, new role, all of that, but being able to, when a skip level pitches an idea, I was able to jump in. So those are the types of things now I teach and encourage and try to instill in others that I mentor and coach as well. Is, we don't have to limit ourselves to what is in front of us, our role, our title. We can go after big things. So that journey started like that for me. And then when I was even a SharePoint like content team manager, I was not just limited to, making waves in the SharePoint like area. I would do that for entire like Microsoft organization. I would come up with, big, bold initiatives that could go across, my peer teams as well. And many of those initiatives, like even creating showcase code samples for, these build conference and all these, huge conferences, I would actually, drive those initiatives across, like even outside of my team, right? So I would actually make these big, bold initiatives. And then when I was in this last team where I talked about, this internal AI platform that I was responsible for evangelizing, there was an opportunity to just, create a half a day event. And my manager just casually said, hey, let's create a half a day event and bring some developers and maybe educate them on the platform, evangelize the platform. And I went back and created a company-wide conference across the world. So we actually, that conference then became global, and we would have that in every like in Ireland, in China, in India, and all of that as well, along with in the United States. And really grew big until I was there, like, for many years after that, like 4 or 5 years, we were continuously doing that conference until I left. And I think it's still happening. But the idea is, what I'm saying is, that's kind of when, a great example of elevating your impact. Like, yes, you can, the opportunity comes, and yes, you can do a half a day event, but you can also make it into a multi-day kind of, company-wide conference and elevate your impact like that. Those are the types of things that I now coach and mentor, and help people think bigger, and help people also make sure that that was very strategic. The reason when I pitched, from the half a day event to the conference, I didn't have any issues with getting buy-in or approval. And it was a like very expensive, huge initiative, by the way. I mean, doing a company-wide conference for, across multiple countries. But the reason it was, there was no issues, it was approved because I knew that it was so strategically aligned with what the organization wanted. Like, I know, and from Satya, like everyone wanted the entire product teams within Microsoft to build on that platform. But every group in Microsoft, I mean, as in any other big organization, we operate in silos, and it's really hard. I mean, there is a certain way everyone's already building these features. And so when when everyone's asked to go into this one centralized platform, it's not easy to make that move. So that's why, there was a need for my team, and we were, what we were trying to do. And so I knew that, like, for my senior leaders, this is very strategic, and it's good, everyone's going to say yes because this is what is needed. And really, after just the first instance of that conference, like hugely successful, we had people, the number of people that registered, like I think 2.5 times more people showed up to the conference. And it was just an outstanding success from year one, and became an annual event. And what it resulted in was, it put the AI platform like on the map. Like literally one senior leader came up to me in that after that, when that conference was happening the very first year, and he said, Uma, like you put the AI platform on the map, like across the company. And so that's the kind of impact you can have, right? Like if I had limited myself and said, oh, this is my role, and this is the half a day event I'm going to do, okay, let me just do that, like I would not have experienced or been able to create what I could create. But it's these types of things where you just let go of those limiting limits that we have set, or limits that are set externally, and you really align with the strategic needs of the company, and think big and come up with ideas and seize those opportunities. You can do amazing things. So that's one example that comes to mind.
No, I mean, it's a great example. If any, it's a great story that really amplifies in the sense of like, there's obviously the strategic part. You're seeing like the impact and not limiting yourself to a box. Like it's words that like I hope everybody could resonate with, and it's pretty very straightforward. No, don't get me wrong. The feat itself is not straightforward. Like mission accomplished. It was a great feat. It was definitely not straightforward, but like hopefully the understanding behind what you're saying, the strategic part, but also like strategic effort, right? You knew what effort was required to put where, and that's
Yes.
probably just the highlight, knowing where to put your effort to have strong impact. Because I keep on saying that like some things could be high impact and high effort. It might not always be the best thing to do at the end of the day, but hey, if you guys want to hear more about that, there's Limitless Leaders that can help you with so much more about it. The other points I want to do some quick fire questions. Like I geek out about this kind of stuff because like you are forced to communicate with other people, regardless if you want it or don't want to. Of course, there's maybe one role in 10 where you can really just silo yourself and just build stuff and like everybody leaves you alone. But chances are you do need to communicate with other people. So maybe even the second pillar of like when we're talking about the I guess like high impact communication, whether it's a meeting, whether it's anything like that. I think like a lot of my questions I expressed with some of these that if I want to have a point come across in a meeting, I have very, very structured ways. At the beginning of the meeting, I just tell you, if we come out of this conversation, this meeting, and we still have not answered these questions, which I have a list of questions. Every time it's like, if we have not answered a single one of these questions, this meeting has been useless. I would be very explicit about that. But that's Perry's way of doing things. So maybe my question to you is that Perry has a framework. I don't know if many people has a framework, but what would you think about in terms of like helping other people out? Do you suggest frameworks? Or do you suggest another way to communicate? Do you suggest like just being yourself? Sometimes people say that as a guide, but like, what is your take on like being an effective communicator?
Yeah, so for me, it actually comes down to two things. One is the mindset. Like I really see that if I just teach the strategy, right, which is the frameworks, it's not enough. If there are things that is preventing us from speaking up or holding us back, no matter how many frameworks I learn, I will not be able to confidently go and use those frameworks and strategies. So we focus on mindset, to make sure that we have a good state of mind before we get into the room. So that's kind of like one aspect of it, and then the other aspect is the strategy. So yes, definitely I teach frameworks. That's kind of my thing. I have a framework for everything. So a framework for how to kick off meetings, how to wrap up meetings, how to do different types of meetings. If you're pitching an idea, if you want to get a buy-in, if you're talking to a difficult stakeholder, so kind of different frameworks and strategies to use. And I think when you apply both the mindset piece and the strategy piece, it all comes together, right? And people are able to successfully apply it. In our programs, we also create an environment for practice and feedback. So they're actively getting live feedback, they're practicing, we meet every week. So it's kind of in a group setting, in a small group setting with my other clients. So they also get, peer feedback from me, they get an environment to practice. So it kind of, makes it real for them. So when they're going and really applying it, they've already had some practice.
Because it's daunting at the end of it. No matter what you do at the end, it's daunting. You'll never get it right on the first try. Maybe some people do, but like most of the time you won't get it on the first try, and that's why it's super helpful. But this leads into obviously like we're going through the part where we're talking about building a brand, because everything you end up doing, whether you're communicating or making strategic decisions to like build stuff, it ends up building your brand at the end of the day. And for me, like I know people who don't want a brand. They'll be like, what do you mean brand? Like, what does that even mean to begin with? But as we were saying, like, there is usefulness to a brand, as in, like, whether you want or don't want it. Like, think about going to class. There's always that. Every kid has something. It's
Oh,
that
yes.
that
Yeah.
kid that does XYZ, or that person that does XYZ. So maybe like in this professional setting of like when we talk about being a leader of or being having your own identity, like what is, I guess, like your take on building a brand? Like what does that mean in essence of like what's the benefit of having a brand?
So my answer to this is we all have a brand. Like no whether we are intentionally developing it or not, we all have a brand. Like when, how you show up, how you're presenting yourself, the value you bring. I mean, based on that, people have a perception of you. That's your brand. When you're not in a room, how people describe you, I mean, that's your brand, right? And people are doing that. Like no, and the way and the thing that we are saying is, hey, since there is always a brand that's getting created, like people are perceiving us in a certain way, let's intentionally design it so that and craft it so that the brand that I want to project and the real who, like that I am, like it's all aligned, and the way people see it is also the same. So it's kind of what we're doing is building an authentic brand and communicating it clearly. So the true, Uma, and the projection, as well as what other people are perceiving, it's all identical and the same, and the one that is what we want, people to see as well. So that's kind of the work that we do. What I see is people have, good, like, values, they have strengths, but sometimes they are not communicated, and the people see only the things that um, or sometimes the weaknesses, or like the people just end up seeing slightly differently, and then you're thinking, hey, I'm doing all this work, but I'm not getting recognized, and then but something else that I'm doing which is causing a different perception in other people, and so they are looking at you differently, and so there is a gap. So that's the gap we try to address by creating a leadership brand and then articulating it very clearly.
Yeah, and of course it ties to the other part of like when we're talking about this brand is, yeah, you can't run away from it. So the whole point is that like if people talk about, oh, I don't fit in my own brand, or I'm not comfortable in my own brand, or some people think about like this imposter syndrome, as somebody would call it. This is really just that topic that Uma was just talking about in terms of like, hey, it's your brand. That's your brand. You could embrace it. There's no reason why you're gonna live the rest of your life without embracing that brand. But even when we talk about like the trusted circle part, this is the part where we're talking about like my question here. I may know the answer, I probably don't, but like trusted circles, we talk about people that, of course, when you work with some people, like you do have people that you work closely with, but even like further away, your impact affects other people that like unintentionally they would trust you more, even though you weren't directly talking to them. So now my question here is probably more like a trusted circle, I guess. Do you find one or do you build one?
You build one. I built one. So I actually, my journey in this area started when I was a teenager, when I was, I talked about doing that chemistry and the GNIT program with the computers. Actually, at that time, I stumbled upon Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I don't know if you know that book. So that book changed my life. And I realized that success is something you create with your mind, and so that's really kind of the on the foundation of like everything that I did after that. So I kind of knew that there's I don't have to rely so much on the external circumstances or be defined by them. I can create my life and design my life. So I think I'm very grateful that it happened so early on in my life, and I realized it. But that's kind of put me in this path of knowing that I have to intentionally create some of these things. In fact, there is a chapter in that book called Masterminds, where the author Napoleon Hill talks about the importance of having other people, like, having a mastermind group, bringing in other experts and learning from them continuously. So I think subconsciously, like, that started my journey. I don't think I made that connection explicitly as I started my career. But over the course of the years, when I never, like, I'm very different in that I don't like to struggle. and I don't like to figure things out like just by, I mean, I like to have multiple resources, people, like rely on experts, have that so that I can fast track. Like I'm very fast moving person. So I like, anything, like any project, any initiative I come up with, I have to like launch it, like, immediately. I have to go deliver this, see results quickly. So that's how I'm wired. And so because of that, I don't like to, go alone, because I know that's not the fastest path. So I always try to find mentors, people, training, courses, resources. I'm also an obsessed kind of self growth and learning kind of person. So I'll sign up for courses. I'll do those types of things as well. So what that led me to give you an example, like for example, when I wanted to shift from C sharp type of programming to like Angular and then to mobile development, I actually found a mentor to guide me with that, right? And just for a few months, that was for that season of life. I asked one of the my I mean, I had another mentor, long term mentor. I asked him, and he put me in touch with one of his direct reports, Ryan. And Ryan was my mentor for the next, whatever, 6 to 8 months while I was making that transition into Web 2.0 frameworks. And then same thing happened when I wanted to do this company-wide conference. Of course, I have no marketing background. I'm not, I'm in the product team and never had any like experience, creating conferences at that scale. So I've again through use my network and found a mentor, a program manager that was actually doing a company-wide conference 4 years before that, right? So and then of course when I asked him, he said yes, I would help you, and kind of he was my mentor for the next couple of years and really helped me be successful in this whole conference endeavor. So that's kind of like one thing that, that's how I think. So I really want to have people around me that I can learn from, that can prevent me from making some of the same mistakes that they might have done before. I also continuously learn and read books and do courses and all that. Even now, like I'm new to business. I've been just last few years. I've been I launched a business and everything is new. I have a set of amazing like business mentors and coaches and leadership coaches and all that. So again, that's my model, right? And the thing that I want to say to your audience is, just because I operate that way, I have had the least amount of stress, had the highest amounts of impact in my role, and with the least amount of stress, and just total, like every day I wake up, I'm like energized, excited. And if something happens, right? I mean, I'm human, things happen. If something happens, I can immediately go to someone and, immediately bounce back. So that's also something that's been super helpful. So having this trusted circle, yes, I design it intentionally right now based on the important areas for my business. I have people that I've invested in that are supporting me in different ways, and that's really the reason that every day I can wake up and be pumped up to work on the business, deliver amazing results for my clients, and go on with energy and excitement every day.
No, I think this is great because even before asking the question, like I know I didn't specify the trusting circle of is it you trusting other people or other people trusting you? But even without mentioning it, is that like the way you encompass what you could notice from your surrounding is that it's not one way or the other, it's both. Like it's a conversation. It's not a dialogue at the end of the day.
So it's both actually. So one aspect of it is you master relationships, and you have a set of people where you can build trust and earn trust with them. And of course the other side is the trusted circle idea. For me is actually external. It's for me to have a trusted circle around me, to make sure that I have people that I can trust. And of course they have to trust. I mean, they in some cases they also trust me back. But I have I know some mentors, for example, that probably don't even know me. Like I follow them, I learn from them, but they don't know me. So it's possible to have members like that in your trusted circle that don't know you. But I think it's definitely both ways.
No, that's incredible. It's whatever shape you want it. A trusted circle, trusted hexagon, whatever you want. That's really just the best way of looking at all this. But of course, like these topics, I keep on saying that like I geek out on these topics because like if you think about it, I work in tech and a lot of people work in tech and you don't get so many opportunities to talk about this kind of stuff at work, right? When you talk about work, you talk about meetings, you talk about when's the deadline, how do we work with QA, like get the designs. And whenever I do get this opportunity, I try to like, I guess like provoke these conversations. But like, don't get me wrong, I get the opportunity to be on this show because I get to talk to so many great people about this. But one thing I could tell people is like, just prompt these conversations. Like, I mean, like, I don't know if you get paid more or less by prompting these conversations, but just do it. It's always fun. And one thing that I always think about is that, like, if you can't prompt it at work or if you can't find the right people, whatever, I mean, think about programs like Limitless Leaders. Think about programs like that where it's like the whole purpose of it is that it's there. People have gone through the same experience. People have gone through to be able to, whether you want to call it level up or just like look at it from a different perspective. That's one way of why I keep on saying that when we just cover these like different pillars of like strategic impact and all these like trusted circles, not only is it available through a platform like what Uma is working on, but also, if I got that correctly, you do have a book coming out soon. And I do want to mention this. I don't know if you have a name yet or not, but the thing is like what we just spoke about, I was going to use the word addicting, but it's more like it's informational, if anything. So you found a way that you're going to put all this in a book? Like, what can you share so far? Do you even have a name to it? Or what was the content? Like, what was the great idea behind that? I think it's exciting.
Yeah, the book will come early 2026. But the working title is The Sought After Leader. I don't know if that will be the final title. So it's definitely The Sought After Leader. So what I have seen, Perry, is, as I said, there is a formula that if we apply that, we can actually, become the type of person that is sought after, highly relevant, in demand in today's market, seen, heard, understood, recognized for the value that they bring, and is kind of sought after, pulled in for opportunities, doors are opening for you. And the book actually summarizes that formula and explains that, like, this is really what I'm helping my clients with. And the book is again another like way I'm communicating that, in that whole process and the different frameworks. So full of frameworks, exciting stuff. I'm really pumped up. I think the book also definitely an impulse decision to write the book. Just suddenly jumped in and decided to write it. But I think it's been the best thing that I've done this year, or I'm like doing this year, is deciding to write the book, because it's given me so much clarity for myself, and really given me a way to make this message reach even more audience, hopefully.
No, I mean, even what we just spoke about is a preview. So we'll have you back on the show when the book comes out and all that kind of stuff. But the cool thing about it is that, like, when we talk about unlocking your potential of being a leader, you know what I mean? Like, these are stuff that, like, it sounds crazy, but you have it. Whoever you are, you have it if you want it, basically, which is kind of the fun part.
Oh,
and we're talking about, like, what does success mean for a leader at the end of the day? Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the topics of, like, achieving like work-life balance. Those are all like different keywords that, like, hey, people talk about this stuff. Go read it. Go chase after that. Find the piece of, like, oh, these people make it sound very easy, of like controlling their schedule, controlling the meeting, all that kind of stuff. Where does that come from? I feel like that's just a perfect like segue into whether it's like follow up with Uma stuff, but follow up with any kind of people that want to talk about this. I think that's the best remedy to figure out the next step on a lot of that. So one thing I do want to mention is we all love tools to help our day to day. This is me, like, at the basic core level. You don't need a PhD to answer these kind of questions, but maybe from Uma's perspective, what are some call out, I guess, like apps or like call out tools what tools do you use to manage your life? It's a weird question. I ask this quite often where it's like top 3 favorite apps or whatever, but what is yours? It doesn't have to be top 3. It could be whatever your favorite apps are, basically.
So thankfully for me, when I launched Limitless Leaders is when ChatGPT came out, like right when I think I decided to post my first post on LinkedIn about the company. ChatGPT came out. So I think ChatGPT has been ChatGPT plus like all related AI tools, similar tools have been amazing in that many aspects of what I do for the business. We leverage the AI tools, even like things like Descript for videos, There's a bunch of tools I use. And then also I'm big into community because I have a background in community. So I use a platform called Swarm for our client community. It's a video-based platform, so clients can come and of course, record videos very easily in the platform. The primary mode of communication in the video is short videos. But because we also focus on communication in our programs, my clients can, if they're going to a meeting or an interview, they can actually come into the platform, have a private space for themselves where they can record and see themselves, practice answering a question and see themselves answering it. So I love that platform as well. It's called Swarm. And what would be another one is what I'm thinking. I like hero.fm. That's a private podcasting tool again. Pretty new. I'm actually playing with it right now. I'm trying to record a private podcast. So that's another one that I like. I think I'm starting to like, I would say, because I'm very new to that platform. But that's again integrated with SMS and all of that. So it's kind of like a platform that very easily you can record a private podcast. And if you do a public podcast, which you have experience with, you have to go through some hoops of like getting it approved in Apple and all that. Here, you can actually just publish, and the private podcast will be published on Apple and Spotify and all major platforms. But the only thing is it's not public, so you have to have your clients text you a word. And then if they do that, they get subscribed to a private podcast and they can listen. So I'm excited about it. That's my newest, thing that I'm playing with. So hoping to release a private podcast soon for my clients. I think those are some of the tools that come up. But again, we use Canva. Like Canva is another one of my favorites right now. I'm big into you talked about also, we talked about strategic impact and all that. So I actually don't like to spend a lot of time doing things that either another person or another tool can do. So I mean, that's kind of how my brain works. So I would either delegate it to a tool or a person. And, I only do things that only I can do. Like that's my motto. And I've always had a team of people with me as well since I launched the company. And it's been, I mean, that's kind of just how I think. But in terms of tools that you asked, yeah, these are some of the tools that definitely come to mind. We are highly into, like, I sign up for different tools and, use them like without like, even thinking too much. Like, I'm like, okay, this tool sounds promising. Let me try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we get a lot of success from using tools and automation.
I've never regretted asking this question. I've asked this question many times, and like even the way you describe why some of these tools are great. I think some people love listing like Slack is great, but they don't really explain why it's great. Don't get me wrong, I love Slack. I only use Slack. I mean, I'm forced to use Slack anyways. But like the examples that you gave I absolutely love it. When you even talk about Descript, like for the people who don't do media stuff, like it's a great tool to like transcribe stuff and do all of that. And then like when you go a little bit deeper of talking about these like maybe newer tools of like Hero FM and like Canva, I think is getting quite popular for a lot of people just doing like random mock designs for like t-shirts or something. And even Swarm, I've definitely heard it left and right, but the fact that you were able to share a lot of that, I think it just shows how people like embrace tools, embrace technologies for what we do every day at the end of the day. So thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, the important part is, where could people find Uma? What platform are you? What's the best way to follow a lot of your upcoming things or even your current things with Limitless Leaders?
I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best place. And then we have a website as well, thelimitlessleaders.com. People can go check it out. But mostly, I would say LinkedIn is probably the best bet. I'm pretty active on a daily basis there.
And of course, all that's going to be linked in the description below, so definitely check them out. But it wasn't fair, honestly. This whole episode was just back to back. Not only good stories, but good lesson, good tips. Uma, I just want to say on my end and obviously on everybody's end, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks a ton. This was definitely a super fun way to start my day, and looking forward to maybe coming back again once the book is out.
Until then, though, I will catch you all on the next episode and definitely follow with everything that Uma is doing next. So I'll catch you on the next one. See ya, bye.
And that was Uma Subramanian, founder and CEO of Limitless Leaders.
All the links are shared in the description notes below. Go check them out. If you would like to be on Podcast Room by a Software Engineer, reach out to us. Just email contact@perrytiu.com. Can't wait to have you on the show. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Podcast Room by a Software Engineer. Don't forget to hit the follow button on your podcast app and leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's completely free. And if you want to tell your friends about Podcast Room by a Software Engineer, that's totally cool as well. Anyways, I'm Perry Tiu, and you've been listening to Podcast Room by a Software Engineer.